The B20 South Africa Summit is hosting its midterm conference. The gathering provides a platform for companies and business organizations to discuss their perspective on global economic and trade issues, as well as to come up with consolidated recommendations for South Africa's G20 presidency. Watching the story is SABC News reporter Gloria Sefako, who joins us now live from that event. And Gloria, what are some of the issues that you reckon are likely to top the agenda there?
Good morning, Ayanda, and let me also greet our viewers. We are in an environment that is filled with uncertainty, obviously coming out from the tariffs that we have been talking about since the beginning of the year from the US, geopolitical tensions. I'm pretty sure those are some of the issues that will be coming up in these discussions. Some of the issues, these economies, that are not inclusive, like our own, that is not so inclusive. The leaders are trying to find ways to try and solve those kind of challenges, try and create jobs that will everyone can have a decent job. So with this forum, the forum for businesses in the G20 countries, they're trying to push those kind of issues to try and resolve these challenges in this environment, especially that we find ourselves in. But to talk to us more about that, we are joined by the chair of the Trade and Investment Task Force here, the B20, is Ms. Busisiwe Mabuza. Ma'am, thank you so much for joining us. Just take us through some of the priorities, especially in your task force, the trade and investment that you've been focusing on, that you'll be contributing to this.
Glorious, thank you so much for the introduction, and especially emphasizing that the B20 is an engagement group that dialogues amongst our counterparts in business in order to give policy recommendations to our respective governments that talk to our environment. The issue of the trade and investment environment that has become increasingly unstable, despite our colleagues from Brazil in their 2024 chairship of the B20 having called for the promotion of better trade and investment governance. We've seen tariff escalations. We've seen non-tariff measures coming to the fore. And business requires a stable and predictable environment in order for business to thrive. So the task force has called for governments to promote a stable trade and investment framework and environment. And I'm pleased that we had 41 countries participating in our task force, over 200 members, over 50% of whom were women. We had small, medium enterprises as well as global leaders. And they're calling for the promotion of a stable trade and investment environment. We are calling something that is novel for the B20 for a new trade and investment deal for the African continent. We have 18% of the world's population in the African continent, and yet only 3% of global trade. And you would know that most of the trade, when it comes to exports, is the export of raw minerals and the import of finished goods. We believe that our G20 partners need to consolidate all the initiatives, economic initiatives that they have with the African continent in a manner that will help facilitate the fast tracking of the implementation of the African Continental Free Trade Area through crowding in relevant investment into infrastructure into the continent. And of course, we couldn't ignore the impact of climate change, and we are calling for a climate responsive framework that is interoperable and that does not exclude developing countries.
So talking about, with African countries exporting raw materials and importing them as finished goods, for the longest time we've been talking about value addition, industrializing our economies with the African Continental Free Trade Area as well. We need to have goods that we're trading amongst each other with. To what extent is the current environment that we're working on also an opportunity for us to fast track that, to make sure that we actually benefit from the raw materials that we have?
So our task force recognized that opportunity, with this being the very first G20 that is hosted on the African continent, we have the platform to call on everybody in the continent and outside to start considering investment into the African continent so that we are beneficiating the raw materials as close to source as possible. And we also believe that we as African business need to recognize that at 15-17% intra-African trade penetration, we are woefully low compared to the other regions where you see the intra-regional trade tick up to around 50%. If we just unlocked that, and we believe that crowding in investment in an environment that is stable and predictable will help unlock that opportunity. And if that happens, small, medium, large businesses will benefit immensely.
To what extent is the issue of high cost of debt for African countries? We understand that there is this perception that the African continent is, despite facts showing otherwise, that the African continent is a risky place to invest money in. To what extent is that going to be a challenge in terms of trying to bridge the infrastructure gap that is also a hindrance to intra-Africa trade?
And I'm pleased that the correct voices are beginning to challenge this perception risk premium that we see in the cost of funding of the continent. And of course, Glorious, if you layer on that, our cost of funding is very high. Layer on that the exchange rate risk that we face as a continent, it makes for a prohibitive environment for all of us. I'm pleased that our Reserve Bank, our fiscal leadership has now started questioning the risk premium and are engaging with the ratings agencies to say, please reconsider how you rate this continent, because our experience, if you look at the profitability of funders, is that the risk premium is unjustified.
Thank you so much, Mama, for talking to us. Well, that is Seme Busi Mabuza, who is the chair of the Investment and Trade Task Force, talking to us there about the kind of issues that they will be pushing forward in terms of the recommendations that they propose to be sent to the meeting in November for the G20 head of state, and hopefully to be incorporated as policy in the different countries to try and resolve the challenges that the world faces. Back to you, Ayanda.
All right, Gloria Sefako left us there from Sandton for that reporting. Thanks very much indeed.